had a very difficult reading year because I experienced about 6 different really long reading slumps. I read some books I really didn't enjoy that kind of took me away from reading. So this video is going to be a special shout out to the 6 books that really reminded me, number 1, why I love reading, number 2, why I love literature so much. So this is going to be my top 6 favourite books of 2024. This is in no particular order of preference, but rather in chronological order of how I read them all. So the first book is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is actually the first good book I read this entire year, which is why I think it also bumped its way up to the top 6, because it just really reawoken me my love for reading. And it's just such a fantastic book. It's a contemporary lit fic. It's kind of an explorative medium, and it's about this group of women, namely the main character whose name we actually never get, and they are living in this cell, this cellar, this underground prison. We don't really know what it is, but they're living in a massive cage, and they've been there short of a decade. So the main character is between 16 to 18 years old. I don't think it's confirmed at any point, and she's been in there since she was an infant, so she's never really known a world outside of this prison and outside of the cell, and they don't know why they're there. They have no idea why they're there. Something just sort of happened and they were put in there, and no one really remembers much from their past, and they don't have any men. It's just women in this cell, and the only men around them are the guards who wear these masks, these uniforms. They never speak to them. The only interactions they have really is when they bang on the cages to make sure no one's breaking the rules, no one's trying to kill themselves, no one's trying to hurt themselves, and they open the gates once a day, twice a day, just to feed them. So they give them the pots, the pans, the very simple ingredients, blunt knives, etc. And one day, as the guards are prepping to open the gate, they've got the key in the gate, a blaring alarm starts ringing, and everyone just sort of panics, and the women don't know what this alarm means, but the guards evidently do, because they leave in like a really intense panic. They just rush out of that, which means that they accidentally left the key in the gate. So the women immediately take that opportunity, they unlock the gate, and they go outside, only to find that they're in sort of a desolate, empty area. There's absolutely no one around. It's just this weird little bunker that takes you downstairs to their prison and to the guards' offices. So they take all of the food, all of the rations, everything that they can find, and they just sort of camp outside. And then eventually a few days pass, or a few weeks pass, and they decide, we need to explore this world. We need to figure out why what was happening. And so they go on this very, very long journey that spans over years, basically trying to find answers, trying to understand why what happened to them happened, what it is actually that happened to them. But during their journey, as they span this massive desolate earth, they just keep finding bunkers like their own, and in every single bunker, all of those people just died inside the bunker. They just starved, they dehydrated after the guards ran off. And it happens that the main character and her group of people were the only group of people who were lucky enough to have had keys stuck in the gate when the alarm started ringing, and everyone else around them just kept dying, and it kept on being groups of women and groups of men, etc, etc, etc. And then eventually the group of women that the main character is with start slowly, getting sick and dying out. And as they do, they're building these communities, they're building like physical homes, huts, they build a village of their own. But because a lot of those women were middle-aged or older when they were put in these cellars, and it's been 30 years now, 40 years, they all slowly start dying out until it's just the main character left. And she still perseveres. She still goes on this entire journey to try and find answers, and she keeps being met with the same thing. And something I really, 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 really loved about this book is that the ending is so unbelievably unsatisfying, but it is the only ending for this book that could possibly have made sense. I feel like any other ending that would have satisfied the reader and just made us feel better wouldn't have been an honest ode to the actual book. It wouldn't have really done what the book was supposed to do. I think it's a fantastic exploration of womanhood, of femininity, of community building, of what it means to be lost and confused in a world that doesn't explain things to you. I loved every single second of this book, and the fact that all of this happened in about 150 pages is truly impeccable. I then read a short story called The 6 Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harlow, which in my opinion is still one of the greatest stories I've ever read in my entire life, which is saying a lot considering it was 42 pages on my iPhone. So on my Kindle, it was 42 pages. I just read it on my commute to work, and I've reread it twice since then. This is such an incredible book, and it reawoke my love for fantasy, which I really needed, because I'd been in about a year or 2 year long fantasy slump, and I hadn't been reading any good fantasy books, and this reawoke that love for fantasy for me. It's about this young girl who is just sort of, she's sick and she's dying, and she's in a barn or a shed, and she gets visited by the saint of war, the saint of death, who tells her basically like, girl, stand up, get the hell up, you've got stuff to do. And that main character gets trained. She gets trained to be the most revered warrior in the land, in the world. But then I don't know how to explain this without giving you spoilers, because it's such a short story. So actually, I'm not going to tell you the plot. Rather, I'm going to tell you that this story even, not book, it's just it's wonderful. It explores love, it explores selfhood, it explores identity, it explores how you feel in a world that feels like it was created for you, even though you feel out of place in this world. It explores what it means to constantly be finding the same person over and over and over again. I really loved the story, and I don't know how much harder I have to beg people to read it, because it's 42 iPhone Kindle pages. Please read it. Next on my list is a book that truly pulled me out of a reading slump that I had been in for months, and thus resulted in me reading 12 books in 1 month. Funny Story by Emily Henry. This book, let me tell you one thing about me. When it comes to love, when it comes to romance, I love consuming that media, but I am in fact a cynic, okay? I find it hard to believe sometimes, you know? Reading that book, I kind of had to apologize to myself. I kind of had to say, you know what? Maybe love is real. Now, the next sentence I'm going to say is going to sound a little bit confusing, but it will eventually make sense. The book is about the main character, Daphne, who gets dumped on the night of her fiance's bachelor party because he comes and tells her that he's actually always been in love with his best friend. So Daphne ends up having to move in with Miles, that best friend's ex-boyfriend, who also got dumped that same night for the same reason. And so they end up moving in together because obviously, you know, can't live with the people that have just dumped you and are madly in love with one another. And they're so bitter and just spiteful because how dare you be happy and in love when you've just broken my heart. And one day they decide to pretend like they are dating. It's fake dating, but it's fake dating done right, you know, because it's not fake dating out of obligation. Rather, it's fake dating because it's just so fun to fuck with their exes. And the way that they do it and the way that Miles does it is just so funny, you know, like he doesn't care. He's not taking this stuff seriously. He's just thinking, yo, they would hate that so much. Let's do it. And I loved it. I loved every single second of it. And then Daphne starts deciding she wants to move city, you know. The only reason she lives in the city is because she was here for her ex. And Miles is like, why would you, you know, base your entire life around one man? Let me teach you what this city has to offer. Let me teach you what this town has to offer. The beauty of what it means to live here. And obviously, as happens with fake dating, especially when done right, as they do this, as they go through this process, living together, developing a really beautiful friendship, they slowly fall in love. And I loved every second of it. I swallowed that book in one night. Let me tell you, I had a flight. I had to leave my house at 7 a.m. for a flight. I went to bed at 4 a.m. because I just could not put that book down. I had the best time reading it. And if you don't believe me, let's just... Oh, fuck off. Is that not humiliating? Number 4 on the list is If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. None other than James Baldwin, the man whom I adore with everything in my being. I have a quote of his tattooed on my body. I've got 2 of his posters in my room. I've got stickers of him everywhere. I love that man. I love everything he stands for as a person, stood for as a person, as an author, as an artist. Every single thing about him just makes me feel warm and happy and joyous inside. If Beale Street Could Talk, of all of the James Baldwin works I've read, which isn't a lot, it is so far the best. It is so far my favourite. It's the most well written, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. It follows Tish, who's 19, and Fonny, who is, I think, 21 or 22 years old. And Tish is pregnant with Fonny's baby, but Fonny has been arrested and wrongfully accused of rape because he's a black man in America in, I think, the 60s or the 70s. I can't actually remember the date that it was set, because this was in September and I can't remember those details, but it follows this. It's a non-linear narrative. It goes back and forth between, you know, the journey of their love and the journey of Tish trying to find all of the different ways that she can bring him justice, that she can prove that he didn't do this, he didn't commit these crimes. And it's just something about James Baldwin's writing, and I said this in my September reading wrap-up about this book, and I say this in a lot of my videos and a lot of my discussion points about him, is that his writing is so unbelievably timely. You know, I have never once read a book of his and read something and thought, this doesn't happen anymore. Perhaps maybe Giovanni's Room and Homophobia, but Homophobia is still very alive and well. It's just concealed between microaggressions now. But his race conversations, his political conversations, his societal conversations are so unbelievably timely. And If Beale Street Could Talk was just that. It was the way that they discussed Fonny's wrongful accusation, the way they discussed his inability to get any proper representation, the way they discussed the speed with which he was arrested despite any real damning evidence against him was just so fantastic. And the way that their love was written was so beautiful. I could feel that love in the pages. That love had a heartbeat in the book, and I loved it so much. And it's just maybe I'm biased because I love James Baldwin, but I don't think so, because I read Go Tell It on the Mountain and I wasn't that big of a fan of it, in my humble opinion. So I don't think it's a bias. I think that the book is truly just an incredible read and would easily make it into the top 6 of my favorite books of every year if I read it every single year. Number 5 is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This book was so fun. This book reminded me what it felt like to read YA books that didn't sort of expect YA readers to be stupid. You know, something that I've noticed within the last 5 to 10 years is a lot of YA authors and a lot of YA books feel the need to spoon feed everything to their readers, feel the need to tell their readers everything, which to me, if I was a young adult reader, I would be a little bit offended, because why are you assuming that I'm not intelligent? You know, young adults are very intelligent, teenagers are very intelligent, and I feel like a lot of young adult books, especially young adult fantasy, young adult dystopia, are spoon-feeding the message of the story, spoon-feeding what is happening in the story to the readers, because it has no expectations of the readers being able to discern it and decipher it themselves. Scythe didn't do that. Obviously, it wasn't released anytime recently, but oh my goodness. The book is a dystopic sci-fi about a world where death does not exist. So basically, we have conquered immortality, and the only thing that keeps the natural balance of the world are these people called Scythes. They wear these capes, and it's their job basically to glean you, so to kill you, because if you die normally, you can just revive yourself. You can always just come back. You don't get to die without a scythe gleaning you. And a scythe basically comes and he takes 2 main characters, Citra and Rowan, and he wants to train them to be apprentices, and he wants to train them to become scythes because he believes that they would be great scythes. And the discussions that happen throughout this book as they're training, and the way that you understand, you know, power dynamics and life dynamics and societal dynamics, and the way nothing really changes. You're in this beautiful utopia of a world, and a lot of the social dynamics are still basically exactly the same. And then eventually, around halfway through the plot, Citra and Rowan discover that only one apprentice is going to survive. You can't have 2 apprentices, only one of them is going to survive, and they realize it's going to be between the 2 of them. They've already formed this friendship. They're slowly forming a romance, and so they get separated to be trained by different scythes. And that's about as much as I can tell you without giving you any spoilers. But really, really good book, really fun book, really, you know, one of my first explorations of a proper sci-fi like novel. You know, I've read sci-fi short stories, I've watched sci-fi movies, but I've never read a full sci-fi novel, truly. Loved it, loved every single second of it. Dystopia, sci-fi, all of it. I had so much fun. And I have the sequel here, and I'm really excited to read it. I am planning on reading it within the next 2 weeks, so that's going to be very exciting for me. Finally on the list is The Reluctant Fundamentalist by Mohsen Hamid, which is just, I know I've said this about the other 5 books, an incredible book, an incredible read. This was recommended to me by a friend of mine. We were walking in central London at night looking at, you know, the lights, we were on the cable cars and stuff like that, and we were talking about what it's felt like for us to be diaspora in the West, and how it feels sometimes to be surrounded by people who just don't really understand what it feels like to be us. And he told me to read The Reluctant Fundamentalist because he says it explores that, and boy did it explore that. It is about a Pakistani man in Lahore who bumps into an American tourist and decides to tell him a story about the 16 years that he spent living in America as a student, as an employee, as a citizen, etc. And it's a non-linear narrative. It goes back and forth between the conversation between him and the American, and it goes back and forth between the story that he's telling, and it was fantastic. It basically speaks about the starry-eyed nature that he first approached America as a student, how he admired everything about it, the work ethic, the social system, the way everything worked. He loved everything about it, the people, the fun, the exploration. And then 9/11 happened, and he saw the way that brown people and Muslims were being treated. He saw the way America was retaliating with his neighbors. He saw the way that he, as a brown man who had nothing to do with 9/11, was being treated just because he looked like he could be Arab, he looked Muslim, and he slowly started to feel more and more foreign. And then after that, he slowly started to look at the Americans around him and think that they were the foreigners, that they were foreign. And he slowly started developing this weird, you know, resentment for the people around him, for the blindness and the ignorance of privilege that they live in, without realizing just how comfortable their lives are, without realizing how privileged they are, and how much they don't actually know about what their countries and what their patriotism does to other people. The writing was stunning. I think I underlined at least one thing on every single page. It explores human nature, it explores society, politics, romance, love, you know, the complications of love, mental health, everything about it in 160 pages. It was a really, really good book. That is my top 6 books of 2024. I will be posting my full 2024 reading wrap up in a few days, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And thank you for watching. See you in a few days.